on.
One of the more familiar faces on your local television station would have to be Paul Schauble. From station announcer to on-air presenter, production manager to station manager, and then news anchorman. Paul tells us about his experiences on regional television. Looking back in your career in the television industry, when did it start for you?
Well, it was a fair while ago now, because I originally started off with aspirations of being a veterinary surgeon. I did a couple of years of veterinary science at Melbourne University. Having failed that, I went to Griffith in New South Wales on 2RG, the radio station up there. And there was a television station next to that, which was MTN9, and that's where I really got the break into TV, if you like, and used to read the news up there for a couple of years. Now,
when did you make the big move to the city of Bendigo?
Well, it was about 1970, and I remember I came here on the understanding that I was going to earn an extra $5 a week, and that was a lot of money in those days, and we were quite well paid in the early days of radio and television, and so it was a good move for me to come to Bendigo.
And what was your first role with BCV8?
Well, I started off doing voiceovers. That's the voice behind the commercials and behind programs, and also did a bit of news reading, and it was great fun. And I moved from there to be production manager of the station, I think about 1973. And then after colour, which was in 1975, about 1978, I was station manager for some 7 or 8 years.
Paul, there must have been a lot of funny things happen in your television career. Can you take us back to the early days when you made some of those black and white commercials?
Well, there were a few humorous ones. Some of them were quite engineering masterpieces, really, too, because I mentioned the one about pulling that curtain down with the black hair. I mean, that sort of lived on forever, I think. But there were a couple of others, like the commercial we made for, I think it was Wise Electrics in those days, with one of our girls from the film library inside the fridge. That was really a masterpiece of production, and you can see her just make her out as a little person inside the fridge, demonstrating the inside of the fridge. We thought that was one of the great achievements at the time. And when you look back on it, you know, perhaps it wasn't so special after all.
And the major change you saw in your time working at BCV8, what was the biggest change in the industry you saw?
I think probably the colour TV was obviously the bigger one in 1975. Later on, the changes come by aggregation, obviously, when instead of having a choice of the ABC and one other commercial station, there is now a bigger choice.
The changes at the station over the years and the programs, live productions have always been a strong part of the station?
Yes, and particularly local productions in the early days. There was This Week in Agriculture, if you remember, hosted by Ray Vincent. There was Fred McIntosh, who used to do his racing thing. There was Heather Lindy, who did her program in the mornings. They're just a few that come to mind straight away, and we had a lot of fun making some of those, of course. And of course, there was all the Access programs. I think I interviewed some 2,000 people in Access. We had Looking Around and those other things that really made the local people feel part of their local TV station.
You had a stint in the newsroom, but going back before you started reading the news, there was a guy called John Worthy, and he used to get into a lot of trouble in between news stories.
There was one in particular that I won't forget, and that's where he was, because he was a very serious man, and because he was reading the news, obviously, it's a serious business, and he was doing a story about something political, something that had happened, and the local member of Parliament was an Esmond Curnow, as the member for Midlands, and when John threw to the interview of him, there was Esmond Curnow speaking, but underneath they'd rolled the wrong audio, and one of the Muppets was speaking instead, saying, "I've got you in my power," and I'll never forget it. And when we came back to John, he was really annoyed, and you could see it in his face, and if you have a look at this bit of film, you'll know exactly what I mean.
The beleaguered meat industry.
Oh, no, that's a great gonzo.
I have you in my power now, my pretty.
Right, well, we'll come back to that report in just a moment. Meantime, at Maryborough, construction is underway on a fish processing plant, which is scheduled to be fully...
Another of the interesting ones was a day we went to the Kyneton races for an outside telecast, and it was a very, very hot day, and we got back to work, and you got your towns mixed up.
I wasn't going to mention that at all, Alan. There have been some funny things. That was perhaps one of the funny ones. But, of course, you didn't miss the opportunity to correct me when I said we'd been at Castlemaine instead of Kyneton, did you?
Well, they still haven't had a Castlemaine Cup. Looking back in the early days of regional television, most of the commercials were presented live. A bit of extra pressure on the performers.
Indeed. I don't think people quite realise it. And they must have seen some very rough commercials, because we didn't have such a modern type thing as videotape, and everything had to be done live in the studio, which was very demanding. But we got over that, and it wasn't all that long. It was only a couple of years after I got there that videotape did come into operation. But then, of course, you couldn't edit it, and you had to, when you made commercials, you had to do it all in one hit. You couldn't do as we do now and do them in sections, so it was fairly difficult.
Well, Paul, you've been out of television 4 years now. How much has it changed your life?
It gave me a lot of opportunities because it meant I could meet a lot of people that I wouldn't have ordinarily met in ordinary life because, as I said earlier, TV's larger than life. I'm very appreciative for that.
Well, it's great to see you, and thanks for being part of the program tonight.
Alan, good to see you. I'm pleased that you haven't gone grey yet.
Well, there you have it. 4 different views of country television from 4 great personalities. This completes our look back at 35 years of regional television. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have presenting it to you. Until next time, good night.